In 1863, in the middle of a golden Pennsylvania wheat field, a boy is found lying still, face down, his blue Union coat soaked red. A surgeon rushes to his side, but it's too late. The boy is dead. But here's the twist: he's not a soldier. He's 12. There's no weapon on him. No shoes. Just a pocketbook and a letter addressed to someone named Mother. And the thing is, this boy's body was never supposed to be there. Not in that field. Not in this war. But somehow, that's exactly where he ended up. And what happened next, what that letter revealed, shocked even the hard-bitten soldiers of the Civil War. Because this was not just a battle. This was the moment America nearly came apart at the seams. A strange march north. Let me take you back to June of 1863. The American Civil War is raging. Towns are burned. Families shattered. Over 100,000 men are already dead. And General Robert E. Lee is tired of fighting on Virginia soil. So, he makes a bold move. He marches his entire Confederate army, over 75,000 men, into the North. His destination? Pennsylvania. Specifically, a quiet crossroads town called Gettysburg. Why? Because Lee believed if he could strike a major blow deep in Union territory, he could end the war. Or, at the very least, scare the North into surrender. But here's the eerie part. The people of Gettysburg, they had no idea what was coming. The town that never stood a chance, now Gettysburg, was no fortress. It was a quiet farm town. 2,400 people. A single seminary. A few churches. Shops. Stone fences. Rolling hills. People were going about their business. Baking bread. Selling shoes. School was in session. But then, on the night of June 30th, locals began to hear something strange. The sound of drums far off, then hooves, and then gunshots. By sunrise, the first Confederate troops were marching through the fields. And they weren't there to sightsee. They were looking for shoes. Specifically, 10,000 pairs. You see, the Southern Army was desperate. Many of their men were barefoot. They had heard Gettysburg had warehouses full of footwear. So on July 1st, they approached the town. That's when they encountered a line of Union cavalry. One-man brigadier, General John Buford, stood in their way. And John Buford knew exactly what was coming. The man who saw the future. Buford wasn't just a cavalryman. He was a visionary. He looked at the rolling ridges around Gettysburg and said, "If we can hold the high ground, we can win." So with just 2,700 men, Buford stood his ground against a Confederate division 5 times his size. He bought time. He sent urgent messages. Reinforcements were coming, but slowly. And then, the shooting started. The Battle of Gettysburg had begun, and within the first few hours, General John Reynolds was shot through the neck. One of the highest-ranking Union commanders. Dead, soldiers screamed, scrambled. Civilians ran. People began turning their homes into hospitals. One little girl, named Tilly Pierce, she was 15. She grabbed rags from her mother's kitchen and ran toward the fighting to help wounded men. She thought she'd be gone an hour. She wouldn't see her home for 3 days. Hell descends on a wheat field. Let's go back to that wheat field. It was supposed to be just a patch of gold, swaying in the breeze. But by the end of day 1, it would be soaked with blood. Union forces retreated south of town, taking positions on a ridge called Cemetery Hill. Confederates surged in from the west and north. And right there in the wheat field, a regiment of Union troops made their stand. One soldier remembered. The sky turned black with smoke. Men vanished before my eyes. I stepped on something soft. It was a body. And in the chaos, someone else stepped onto that field. A boy, shoeless, shaking, no uniform. His name was William A. Trill. And what happened to him next, we still don't fully understand. But here's what we know. He tried to help. Maybe carry water. Maybe find his brother. But then a musket cracked. He fell face down, a surgeon later wrote. He could not have been older than 13. He bled out alone. And in his hand, a note that read, "Tell mother I tried to be brave." Nightfall and the hook of hope. As night fell, Union troops dug in. They formed a rough, hook-shaped line anchored on Cemetery Hill, stretching to a rocky outcrop called Little Round Top. A position so strong, one general said, even God himself could not take it. He was wrong, because General Lee was not giving up. He looked out over the ridges and told his lieutenants, "We attack tomorrow, at dawn." And what followed would become one of the most brutal days in American history. Men would fight hand-to-hand in orchards, forests, and boulder fields. Commanders would die. Regiments would be annihilated. And the fate of the entire Civil War would come down to a hill, a barn, and one unforgettable charge. A silent hill, a deadly secret. At 4 a.m. on July 2nd, the Union line looked like a sleeping giant. Silent. Still. Unmoving. But in the woods just to the west, 70,000 Confederate soldiers were stirring. General Lee had a plan. He would strike the Union's left flank hard. If it broke, the whole line might collapse. There was just one problem. A small hill called Little Round Top. It looked quiet, insignificant, but if the South took it, they could put artillery there and rain fire down the entire Union line. So Lee gave the order, take the hill, or die trying. And that's exactly what they tried to do. The professor who saved America. Let's meet Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. He wasn't a soldier. Not really. He was a college professor from Maine who taught rhetoric and languages. But on July 2nd, he was commanding the 20th Maine Regiment posted at the far end of the Union line. The extreme left, as they called it, that he was told one thing. You are the end of the line. Hold this ground at all costs. And that's when the Confederates came. Wave after wave. Alabamians, Mississippians, screaming like banshees. They charged up the rocky slope, bullets flying, bayonets glinting. The 20th Maine fought back, but they were running out of ammunition. Fast. Some men had one bullet left, others none. Then, Chamberlain did something insane. He yelled, "Fix bayonets," and ordered his men to charge downhill, straight into the enemy. They weren't supposed to win, but they did. In less than 10 minutes, they drove the Confederates off the hill. The 20th Maine lost over a third of its men, but they held the line, and historians agree that moment may have saved the entire Union Army. The Devil's Den. While Little Round Top was under siege, another battle was erupting just a few hundred yards away. A place with a name as terrifying as the fight that happened there. The Devil's Den, huge, jagged boulders. A natural fortress. Union sharpshooters took position among the rocks. Confederate troops swarmed the area. It became a slaughterhouse. One Union soldier wrote, "You couldn't hear orders. The rocks echoed with screams. Men fell like flies. Bodies piled in crevices. And then, something horrifying happened. Photographers arrived. War photography was new. But at Devil's Den, they began moving the dead, posing them, arranging rifles, trying to make the shots more dramatic. Some of the most iconic Civil War photos were staged. One of them shows a young Confederate boy, face up, rifle across his chest. For years, it haunted families, until they discovered something. He had been moved over 40 yards, which means we'll never really know where he fell, or who he was. The Orchard of Death. By mid-afternoon, the peach orchard in Wheatfield became the bloodiest place in America. Union and Confederate troops clashed in the open. One general described it as a field of men stacked 3 deep, all groaning, all dying. Lines blurred. Units got lost. A general rode up to a wounded soldier and asked, "Whose side are you on?" The man blinked, whispered, "Yours, I think," then died. By sunset, the Union lines had bent, but not broken. Little Round Top still held. The peach orchard lost and reclaimed. The Devil's Den taken, but at a terrible cost. General Lee was frustrated, but he wasn't done. He believed he had found the weak point. And on the next day, he would put everything on the line. A charge into hell, July 3rd, 1863. The final day, Lee decides on a bold move. He will strike the Union Center. And to do that, he calls on General George Pickett. Pickett is flamboyant, charismatic, known for his curly hair and love of grand speeches. That morning, he's told, "You will lead 15,000 men across an open field, a mile wide, under direct enemy fire, and break the Union line." It sounds suicidal, but Pickett salutes and says, "Sir, I will do it." At 1 p.m., over 150 Confederate cannons open fire. The ground shakes. The sky turns black. Union soldiers duck in trenches. Civilians 20 miles away hear the blasts. Then the cannon fire stops, and the field goes quiet until the Confederate line begins to move. 15,000 men, marching in step, across a mile of open grass. Union troops can hardly believe it. One soldier mutters, "They're mad." And then the guns open fire. The march in a madness. The field was almost 1 mile wide, and the men of Pickett's charge were ordered to walk across all of it in full view, under fire, in line. It wasn't a charge. It was a march to execution. Union artillery opened up immediately. Shells exploded mid-air, shredding limbs and bodies. Canister shots like giant shotgun blasts ripped through lines. Confederate soldiers kept moving forward, stepping over the dead, dodging smoking craters, trying not to look down. They had been told the Union artillery was weakened. They had been told the center was vulnerable. They were told victory was possible. They were lied to. The wall of fire. As they approached the Union line near Cemetery Ridge, Pickett's men saw their real obstacle, a low stone wall. Behind it, Union troops waited, silent, steady, rifles raised. The Confederates began to run, screaming, charging, bayonets fixed, flags high. It became hand-to-hand combat inches apart. Fists, bayonets, muskets used as clubs. One Confederate officer, covered in blood, yelled, "For your wives? For your homes? For the South." He was shot in the face before he finished the sentence. Then came the moment now called the high water mark of the Confederacy. Brigadier General Lewis Armistead, with his hat on his sword, led the last group to break the Union line. He made it to a Union cannon, placed his hand on it, and then was shot 3 times. That cannon was never fired by the Confederates. It was as far as they would ever get. The fall of Pickett's men. In less than 50 minutes, over 6,500 Confederate soldiers lay dead or wounded. Some units lost 90% of their men. Bodies carpeted the grass. And Pickett? When General Lee found him after the battle, the flamboyant Virginian stood still, blank-faced, and whispered, "General, I have no division." Lee told him, "It is all my fault. You must help me reform the troops." But Pickett would never forgive him. He never spoke to Lee again. The charge had failed. The Army of Northern Virginia was broken, and the dreams of Confederate victory in the North died in that field. The quiet that followed. The next day, July 4th, it rained. The battlefield turned to mud and blood. Thousands of wounded men lay in agony, many untreated. The smell of death soaked into the soil. Local townspeople were conscripted to help. Women fainted from a stench. Children found limbs in the fields. The dead numbered over 51,000. Union, Confederate, brothers, cousins, strangers. A Pennsylvania farmer wrote in his journal, "The war has found us. We are never the same." Lee retreated. Meade didn't follow. And President Lincoln was disappointed. He had hoped Meade would end it right there, crush Lee. But Meade was exhausted, his men broken. The moment passed. A speech, 272 words long. Months later, November 19th, 1863. The town of Gettysburg was preparing for a dedication ceremony. The graves had been dug, the bodies, most of them buried. The keynote speaker was Edward Everett, a famous orator who spoke for 2 hours. And then Abraham Lincoln rose. He had been invited almost as an afterthought. His speech was 272 words. It lasted 2 minutes. And when he finished, there was only silence. Some reports say polite applause followed, but most say the crowd was confused. Too short, too simple. But Lincoln's words would echo far longer than Everett's. He had said, "That government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth." That day, the war changed. It wasn't just about states' rights or secession. It became about a new birth of freedom. The Battle of Gettysburg ended the Confederacy's best chance to win the war. From that point on, they would never again go on the offensive. It would be a slow, brutal retreat. But Gettysburg left something deeper than a military legacy. It left ghosts. Soldiers reported strange noises in the woods for weeks. Locals spoke of men who walked into the fields and never came back. Even now, visitors to Devil's Den or Little Round Top report whispers, gunshots, shadows, and a mist. But the real ghosts are in the names. Chamberlain, Armistead, Pickett, Meade, Lee, Lincoln. They were men. Flawed, fierce, brave. And in 3 days, on one battlefield, they shaped the soul of a nation.